So today's gonna be my first video on Hysilens in quite a while. The reason I've been making so many Saridra and Phanon videos is because I am maining Phanon and Saridra is his best in slot, right? So I do apologize to the people on the Hysilens side for being so biased towards my Phanon and Saridra content. It's because I'm simply more interested in them and I'm just not really interested in Hysilens at all. Though I do have to say, watching some of these showcases that use Hysilens and Dot, it is entertaining and kind of nostalgic seeing Dot being meta again, right? So, let's go over Hysilens real quick. A quick overview so people understand what she does, right? So, Hysilens, with her skill, makes enemies take 20% more damage, which in HSR terms just means 20% vulnerability, right? 100% base chance to inflict this onto enemies while also doing a bit of physical damage with a 140% attack multiplier. Her ultimate decreases enemies' defense by 25% and decreases the attack that the enemy can do towards you by 15%. E4 Jiaoqiu, right? E4 Jiaoqiu, absolutely insane. So outside of this, she also deals 200% of her attack as physical damage with that big fat whale animation. Right. Whenever an enemy target within the zone takes damage from Dot, Hysilens will deal physical Dot equal to 80% of her attack. The Dot cannot trigger repeatedly, and this effect can be triggered up to 8 times per turn or per ally target's single attack. The zone lasts 3 turns, and it will tick down 1 turn every time Hysilens takes an action. Right. So after this, we have her talent. Her talent is quite interesting, right? When an ally target attacks, she has a 100% base chance to inflict wind shear, bleed, burn, or shock. So basically, whenever an ally attacks, she will just inflict a dot, right? Prioritizing inflicting different states instead of overstacking on multiple of the same kind. And under the bleed state at the start of each turn, the enemy target takes physical dot equal to 20% of their max HP up to 25% of Hysilens' attack, lasting for 2 turns. After this, you have her technique, which will auto-inflict enemies with 2 types of the dot mentioned prior. Next, we move into her traces. At the start of combat, Hysilens creates a zone with the same effect as her ultimate, lasting for 3 turns. Whenever Hysilens creates a zone, which just means whenever she ults, she will recover 1 skill point. This was a pretty big complaint that people had in her earlier versions, which was that the team was simply too SP negative and it wasn't fun to use. You had to spam basic attack because everybody wanted to get at using their skill points. So this was originally locked behind her E1 if I remember correctly, but they decided to move it into her base kit, so W. The next trace is when Hysilens uses ultimate, if the enemy target is afflicted with dot or dots, all dots currently applied on the target will immediately deal damage equal to 150% of their original damage. Now do keep in mind I am quite confident this doesn't mean it's a straight up 150% multiplier. What it more so means is a 50% multiplier, right? So quite nice of something to have. And then her last trace, Strings of Pearl, if Hysilens' effect hit rate is above 60%, for every 10% exceeded, increase this unit's damage by 15% up to 90. So this means you want to hit 120% effect hit rate for the total 90% damage bonus, right? Her E1 increases the dot dealt by all ally targets by 124%. As mentioned earlier, I am quite confident this is not literally a 124% increase. It's an overall 24% damage increase, with the 100% being the base damage. So solid, that's pretty normal for an E1 increase. And then for E2, while the zone is active, the damage boost effect from her trace will apply to all allies. So this means that earlier Strings of Pearl, the exceeding effect hit rate adding on to more damage bonus, I do believe would apply to Kafka, it would apply to Black Swan, it would apply to probably anyone, right? So long as you exceed 60% crit rate. So solid Eidolons, but in my opinion, nothing all too crazy. Now, after this quick overview of Hysilens, what is it that I actually think of this team's performance after seeing some showcases? Well, I think this is a team that's good, but not great, right? And if I were a meta player, I would never invest into Dot, because once again, even though it is a good and solid team as of current, I'd say it's, you know, good enough to be called meta. Unfortunately, the problem with Dot is that it simply almost never gets new teammates for it. So we really don't know when there will be another addition to the Dot team. Will it be another over a year, almost year and a half, like Kafka and Black Swan last were? Because if that's the case, then I wouldn't feel confident investing into the Dot team in the slightest. Now, if you already have a Kafka, if you already have a Black Swan, if you even already have like a Robin and a Ruan Mei that can replace Black Swan, I'd say go for it. Pulling Hysilens will basically instantly allow you to have a good team for clearing most endgame content. However, because their performance isn't great, and the fact that they are Dot, so they almost never get consistent teammates, I simply cannot justify calling them a top tier team or recommending them to people to pull. I think the best example I could use for Hysilens here that fits perfectly is basically she is exactly a Yun Li situation. Yun Li was in 2.4, right? However, the max amount of patches in version 2 was up to 2.7, while in version 3 we're going up to 3.8. So the equivalent of Yun Li would be in 3.5, and the equivalent basically is Hysilens. It's not a top meta DPS. Yun Li wasn't meant to compete with the likes of Firefly, Fei Xiao, or Acheron. She was simply a bit of a filler DPS for the counter lovers, right? And this is exactly how I feel about Hysilens. She isn't meant to compete with the likes of March, or Cassie, or Phanon, or maybe even Anoxa, right? She's not meant to really compete with these other, you know, very lore relevant DPSs. She's just kind of a bit of a filler patch, a filler DPS that is unique, which I can always appreciate, but she simply isn't meant with meta in mind, in my opinion, right? Maybe I'll be proven wrong and they'll even further buff Hysilens in the future versions, making her, you know, value even higher than I ever originally expected. But I actually think that current Hysilens performance is probably exactly what Hoyo is looking for, and even though it's not as meta as some of these other DPSs like I mentioned prior, it's good enough to them so that they can finally build up some hype for the likes of March and Cyrene, right? So that is all I have for you. Oh my god. Wait. I just realized 2.4 is the equivalent of 3.5. 2.4 had Yun Li and Jiaoqiu. Hysilens is also a filler DPS who's physical and not meant to be a really meta DPS. And Saridra is an incredibly niche support that's only best in slot for one DPS. Maybe we've caught on to a pattern. Just maybe, right? Well, now that I've had that realization, right, pattern recognition man strikes again, I'm gonna have to really think about this, right? Love you all. Thanks for watching the video. Hope you all have a great day. Hope you all have a great night. And Peace out.